Hi and welcome to the channel. Thanks for joining us. Today I'd like to share with you my top tips for house sharing or flat sharing. The trend is not so popular in Romania at the moment. People tend to prefer their own spaces and to live alone. Of course, with the rising cost of living, inflation being as it is almost 5%, which in practical terms means that things cost 5% more this year than they did in the previous year. Of course, salaries are not tracking that same growth, and at the same time rents are rising. So more and more it's becoming an economic pressure to consider alternative options, and house sharing is an obvious one to look at. The benefits of house sharing, of course, aside from the economic reasons, are that it can create a space with good company. You've got someone to come home to, someone to talk to from time to time. It can improve your social life. You can help to avoid depression and loneliness. You can share boring duties like cleaning and cooking, bill payments and things. And if you're away at weekends, your boyfriends, your girlfriends, or at your parents, then you've got a pet. Is someone that perhaps that can, let's say, feed your pet. And lastly, but not least, if you're living alone as a girl, of course, it's improved safety in numbers. So my 15 points to consider in order to get this right are as follows. Point 1. Choose your housemate carefully. You're not looking for a new boyfriend or girlfriend or best friend or social friend. You're looking for somebody you can coexist with as unobtrusively as possible. So the optimum housemate is someone that you almost never see, and they almost never see you. And that's perfectly possible if you follow the advice that follows. It's a mistake to offer your room as an act of charity for somebody that's maybe been kicked out or whatever, if you've got a bad feeling. If your instinct tells you that this is going to be a bad decision, almost every single time it will be a bad decision. So it's okay to do it to help someone out short term, but it's not a practical solution for the long term. This person sharing your house should be like a work colleague. It's someone completely separate from your life. You don't interact too much other than to be polite and to communicate as much as necessary, but it's not somebody that's sharing your life. They're simply sharing the economic responsibilities of the place that you live in. Second point is space planning. Try to have as much storage as possible in your own room so you can keep all your junk in there, all your shoes, your clothes, your coats and so forth, and avoid excess storage in the common spaces, i.e. the lounge, because generally when you've got storage, people fill it up with junk, and it's either your junk and it will annoy them, or it's their junk and it will annoy you. So again, avoid excess storage in the common areas and have as much storage as possible in the individual rooms. The third point is to respect each other, as mentioned earlier, much like a work colleague. Respect the boundaries and don't take liberties. Don't impose your problems on them, and in the same way they shouldn't impose their life problems on you. The fourth point is to use technology to help you. So use phone applications for bill sharing, use phone application for transferring money to each other when you need to pay bills, things like that. Simplify the thing as much as possible and use technology to help you to that advantage. Step 5 is to agree on the common cleaning, the standards and the frequency. I.e. the kitchen and the living room should be clean on these certain points, on these certain dates, and you agree to that standard at the very beginning, because it's very difficult to change it further down the line. The sixth point is to organise shared finances. So make a budget for toilet paper, bin liners, washing up liquid, soap powder and things, so there's not a constant point of resentment. Take that out of the equation by setting up a monthly budget, or have a kitty with money in it, and you use it to fund those things. The point 7 is to automate, as mentioned earlier, automate the household chores. So make bill payments done online, maybe organise a weekly cleaner. So you take as much of that responsibility away from individuals, because again that creates a point of resentment. The 8th point is have a food sharing system. So maybe you've got one shelf in the fridge for yourself, one for the other person, and then maybe a common shelf for food that can be shared. Maybe you've got food that's reaching the expiry date and you're not going to have time to eat it. Put it in the shared shelf, and then there's no ill feeling when people eat from that. Similarly, don't go raiding their shelf, or they shouldn't raid your shelf just because they're hungry and steal the blue cheese or the posh yogurts, etc. That's always a point of contention. So at all costs, try to avoid that by using this shared shelf system. Ninth point is hands off their stuff, and similarly theirs on your stuff. You know, it's okay, it's one thing to borrow a hairdryer from time to time, but it's a very different thing to constantly borrow their PlayStation or their tablet or their laptop or their bicycle. That is again a point of irritation. So just buy your own stuff. They should buy their own stuff. Try to get out of the habit of borrowing stuff, especially when you break it. It becomes a very difficult conversation. So again, respect that boundary, hands off other people's stuff. The 10th point is choose your battles. Don't be constantly niggling each other for very small issues. There is some compromise, of course, in sharing, but generally speaking, just choose the points that you really cannot tolerate. And the 11th point is actually to make time for each other. Have a regular once a week, once a month forum where you can mildly, calmly raise these issues and try to explain in gentle terms why their activity is impacting you. It might be that they're walking around with shoes at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, and it prevents you from sleeping. So just find a calm way and a good forum to explain that. The 12th point is to celebrate diversity and to also celebrate the common elements you share between you. So it might be that their taste in music is very different, or fashion is very different, or culture or religion, and that's a positive thing. So that's you can celebrate that. They don't have to be an exact match for your taste in life. And at the same time, there'll be some common ground. Maybe you like to go running together or cycling together, whatever. But once again, back to the earlier point, try to avoid finding somebody that you go running together, you eat together, you go to the cinema together, you basically mimic each other's life. The downside of that is at some point you'll get bored of that and you don't feel able to say no when they want to go for a run or so. So the more you integrate your lives, the harder it becomes to share. So my advice is avoid all that at all costs. It's one thing to go the occasional bike ride, but it shouldn't be a subtext of why you're living together. The point 13 is make common spaces acceptable for each other. So set the standard of how things should look, and then make sure you leave the place clean and dry. The bathroom, the kitchen and the common spaces should be clean and tidy after you've finished with them. The 14th point is do your dishes. If you've cooked something and you sit to eat it, clean the dishes straight away so that they can use the kitchen after you. They shouldn't be held up by waiting for you to come out of your room to wash up the dishes. The final point, the 15th point, is agree at the very start what an acceptable stayover policy is. Maybe it's 1 night per week, people can bring guests, or 2 nights, but it's nothing worse than coming home and the other person's got housemates there and you don't feel like it's your space anymore. So then you rapidly start to not enjoy sharing the space. So if you don't set it up at the beginning, it's very difficult or practically impossible to do further down the line. It creates a lot of tension. So that's my top 15 tips for house sharing. I hope you found it useful. Please like and subscribe to the channel if so, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, stay safe and have a nice rest of the week.